All right, what's up? So today we're gonna be doing something new. We're gonna try some little live coding. We're gonna be checking out some new libraries. My first time trying to do this live. It should be fun. I usually check this stuff out on my own time, and I figured I'd just share with everybody. Basically, what I want to do today is build a little mobile app. My main reason for this is I want to check out RecoilJS. Many of you have probably heard about it or seen it on Twitter. It's a new state management library for React, built by the team over at Facebook. They released it pretty recently. I will pull it up here so you can check out what it is. So what we have is a state management library from React. It looks pretty cool. It's got a new way of doing things. If you're familiar with something like Redux or using context to build applications, this is going to be something a little different. But it should be cool. I haven't done anything with it yet, so we'll be learning it live here together. And I'll make sure to post everything I do on GitHub, and I'll post it probably also as like a YouTube video afterward. And so the idea today is we're not just going to build a mobile app. We're actually going to build a React Native app. The main reason I want to do this is it's fun. We're going to use Expo.js to just scaffold out a really simple React Native boilerplate. And what we'll be doing is a craft beer cataloging application. I mocked it up yesterday in Figma. Also wanted to check out Figma. It seems pretty cool. And I'll show you what that's going to look like. Here's my designs. I am not a designer, so bear with me. It's just going to be something simple. We probably won't even get to implement all of this. We'll just stick to the basics. Again, the main purpose of this is just to check out RecoilJS and get a feel for how things play out and just have some fun with it. I will post all the code online so everyone can check it out. Noah Byrne in the chat, what up? Craft beer, hell yeah. Redux is sick. This is gonna be a cool new twist on it, so we'll see how it goes. So again, this is the app we're gonna try to build. We're gonna get as close as we can. We'll probably start out and break it up into segments, maybe start out with just building the basic functionality of displaying some cool craft beers here. And then add the ability to add a new beer. And the cool thing is, since we're going to hook into React Native, we'll be able to hook into that camera API and actually take a picture of some of the beers we're drinking. Who knows? Maybe we'll drink a few on stream. We'll see how it goes. And the other thing we're going to be using to build it, as I mentioned earlier, is Expo. I'll zoom in here so it's a little easier to see. But Expo is basically an amazing library built by a team of people at Expo that allows you to just scaffold out a React Native app really quickly. It's basically like the Create React app for React Native apps. And it comes out of the box with some really awesome APIs for interacting with the native hardware. Not only that, it gives you a web application right out of the box. So it's super slick and cool. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to be doing. Hope you enjoy it. Follow along. Again, I'll post this stuff on GitHub. I will also post it on YouTube. So if you don't catch any of the stream or you miss it, because this is new, it's probably gonna be hard to find me buried in the Twitch archives, but yeah, I'll post the links to everything afterwards. So let's just hop in. So to get started, I'm gonna follow this step here and basically create a plain React Native project and go from there. I already have the CLI installed, so I can skip this step. So for my first step, I'm just gonna pop open a terminal here. You'll notice I got a lot of Zelda theme stuff going on. I've just been pretty into Zelda lately. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go into my GitHub repos folder here. I'm just going to follow this command. I'm going to create a new project, Expo init. And I'm going to call it Brewbook React Native. So this is going to scaffold out that project and build us out a very basic app. It's going to actually prompt us with some stuff. It's going to give us some options. So we have the blank option, which is a minimal app, empty canvas. We could do the blank Typescript app. I think I might use that. I haven't done too much with Typescript, but it's pretty neat. If you haven't checked that, it's pretty awesome. It's not too much overhead to learn, so maybe we'll go with that. The other option is tabs. So it's going to have some tabular navigation. And actually what it uses for that is another library called React Navigation, which is really cool. We're definitely going to use it. But for now, we'll just stick with the basic one with TypeScript. So I'll go back to my terminal here and let's go ahead and select TypeScript. So the difference between the managed workflow and the bare workflow is the managed workflow is going to give us a lot out of the box. It's going to give us the ability to deploy it and bundle, and it's going to give us the option for basically doing things like code push should we decide to release it. So it's pretty sweet. All right, let's go with TypeScript. This is always everyone's favorite part. We're going to do an npm install, so it should take a good amount of time, hopefully not too long. But in the meantime, we can chat about a few things. So let's go over the app a bit that we're going to be building. So again, it's a basic craft beer cataloging app. The idea here is we'll start out by showing a list of beers. We can hard code them for now. This way we can start breaking up the component. And it'll give us an opportunity to experiment with RecoilJS. What I'm looking to do here is to see how RecoilJS lets us handle state management and do some really neat things. So you can see we have some things we're going to be storing in state, right? We're going to have our brews that have the name, the style. Maybe we'll start out with some hard-coded styles, but then maybe we can hit an API to pull down some styles. I don't know. We'll check that out. We'll do that all together. I haven't done any prep on that side, so we'll see how that goes. Then maybe, a rating would be nice, right? We could sort by ratings at some point down the line. We could put the brewery, and we could view them by brewery, we can view them by brews, add a new brew, and that's where it'll really get interesting. When we add new brews, we can put a name, the brewery style, give it a rating, add a picture, and hopefully display that stuff. But yeah, we'll start out simple and just jump in, maybe just hard code a few to begin with, and see where it goes. At some point, we might want to build some sort of backend to host these things, but for now, for the purpose of this, we'll probably just store things in device storage or local storage. In React Native world, that's called async storage. We'll get into that in a bit. So let's see how our thing's going. Great. So our app is finished building here. So what we can do is we can go jump right into it. And I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code. If anyone is interested in any of the settings I have in Visual Studio Code, I'll just go over some of them quickly. You'll see I'll be using the Vim plugin. It's just, I'm used to it. It's how I navigate around. It may look a little funny. I'm sure you've seen it though in plenty of videos. I can also post a gist to my Visual Studio Code settings. So if you want to just pull any of them down, they're all there. And I use the Visual Studio Settings Sync plugin, so I can sync that between my devices. All right, so cool. So what we have here is a basic scaffolded out app. It's really cool what they've done here. They have your assets folder. You have your classic node modules folder. And we have this app.tx. This can be our jumping off point. This will be where we're going to jump in and actually write some code. Babel config, package lock, package JSON. This is where our dependencies are declared. And a TypeScript config, because we decided to go with TypeScript. So they gave us this really awesome TypeScript config. And hopefully this will play well with Recoil. Again, never tried it, haven't messed with it. We'll see how it goes. Nice. We got a chat part-time lower. What if the user only drinks wine? Hey, you can make this app for anything. It doesn't have to be beer. It could be wine. It could be a video game catalog. It could be anything you want to catalog. It's not something maybe we will release or sell, because there's plenty of these on the market. You could probably just use Trello for this. But yeah, it's just kind of something, whatever you want interesting, feel free to tweak it. Again, I'm going to open source all the code and post it on GitHub. So just go ahead and modify it. You'll probably just end up modifying some of the names of things and uploading different stuff. So yeah, have whatever you want to do with it. It's going to be open source, so it's all up to you. All right, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal, and let's see what Expo does for us. So first of all, the cool thing is we can actually start up the Expo server. This is going to pop open the Expo server, and the cool thing is it's going to actually allow us to open the app in a iOS simulator, or we can open up a web version. I got a question. What does the tsconfig file do? Great question. So the tsconfig file sets up some basic configuration for allowing us to use TypeScript. So you have things like your compiler options. So what we're doing here is it's saying what kind of JSX we're using, React Native, so that it knows we're actually dealing with React Native. What libraries we're using, so DOM and ESNext, that's kind of like what we're targeting. You have some other options that I'm not totally sure what they do. Strict is strict mode. Skip libcheck, not totally sure. No omit, not really sure what that is either. But what you can do is, if you look up the TypeScript documentation, they have an outline of basically everything that the TypeScript config can do. And we'll probably end up wanting to customize it at some point. But yeah, it's pretty neat. So this is a great spot to get your documentation on what some of those things do. For example, if we look up emit, we might be able to figure out what it does. So let's see how our thing is going here. I'm going to pull up my hello world here. And I'm going to open it up on the web browser to start, just to make it easy. And I'll load up the iOS simulator as well so we can see what those look like. So it takes a little while for these to kick off. Basically, the code is compiling, and it'll give you a little message here to indicate that. So here we have my iOS simulator popped open. You can see it's running right now an iPhone 11 Pro Max. And you can change that with the hardware button. You can change the device. So I have a few different iPhones to pick from, but I'll just leave this one. It's kind of cool to play with one that has a notch in it, so you can see how it interacts with the status bar. All right, so we got a little error here. It has to do with Xcode. So let's give that a second. What we'll do is we'll try running it again once the emulator has actually fully started. In the meantime, we'll look at the web version. Oh, batch bridge config not set, cannot invoke native modules. Let's see what that's all about. So let's go here and let's go and try to refresh this thing. So we'll go back here. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on. I'm going to try running in the simulator again and see if it can actually kick it off this time. And generally when we run into this stuff, we'll just Google it. We'll figure out what it is. It gives you a pretty clear error there. Error installing a running app. Xrun exited with non-zero code. So let's see. If it doesn't open again this time, we'll just go ahead and Google that and debug it. This is what we do. So it'll be cool to do it live. All right, let's see what's happening. So we'll let that load a little bit, and we'll walk through the code while we're doing that. So lower this down a little bit. So as I mentioned before, the starting place for our app is this app.tx. You'll also notice an app.json, and you can see the little Expo logo next to it. The app.json is where our Expo App Configuration lives, and it has some pretty cool stuff. So let me show you what that has. So you have the name of your app. We'll change this. We'll call it Brewbook. The slug, that's just a unique identifier. Currently, it's the name of the app we made when we ran that init command. A version, I'm going to say 0.0.1. Orientation, it's what it sounds like. It's the phone orientation that you want by default. An icon, by default, it just uses the Expo icon, but we can change that. A splash image, this is what's going to show when your app is loading. It's pretty cool. Background color, this is just the background color of the app. It shows when the app initially loads. You can modify that however you want. And then we have some other things. Updates, fallback to cache timeout, asset bundler patterns. This is just where it's bundling. iOS support tablet. You could set this to false if you don't want to support tablets. And on web, because it allows us to do web, you can give it a favicon, which is the icon that appears at the top of websites up here. All right, so let's see what's going on here. Let's try refreshing this. Let's see. Let's go ahead and just search for this in Google. All right, let's see. So we have something here. So one thing that's worth noting about Expo is the way it works is it actually installs this app called Expo on the device. And if you're loading it on your real device, you can actually just scan the barcode that you might have seen right here in the terminal, or you can see it right here. And you can scan this barcode on your device and actually run it as long as you have the Expo app. But let's see what we can solve here. So it says, please ensure you're running in a version of Expo that supports WebSDK 33+. Okay. What else? Same issue, simple reproduction. Let's see. Instead of using create native, I tried Expo init, and it compiles successfully to web in both blank and tabs. Okay, interesting. So let's see what we can do. Let's try to check out our simulator again. Let's try running this one more time. And usually when this runs right out of the box, it works. We have a success there, which is interesting. So let's see if it actually opens. Let me try closing this. And it might be an issue with the actual version of Expo we're running here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete the Expo app. And it works just like a phone. You hold down your mouse on it and it'll jiggle, and then you can delete stuff. All right, so let's try this again. So what it's going to do now, it's going to reinstall Expo. And let's see if we can, while it's doing that, dig into what's going on the web so that we can actually get in and try out RecoilJS. Okay, let's see. Update to the latest Expo CLI. That's the step I skipped. Go figure. I already had it installed, so I didn't reinstall it. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and what we're going to do is we're just going to delete the project that we built. First, just to make sure everything's good, I'm going to just go ahead and cancel this. All right, now I'm going to remove that project and we're going to recreate it. Sorry about that. I should have updated the CLI, but I'd used it pretty recently, so I didn't think it would be too big of a deal. But hey, stuff happens. So let's do this. Let's clear my terminal here and let's go ahead and run that CLI install. So this is the regular install command, but I actually have to update it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run change install to update. And let's see what happens. And then we'll check the version, make sure our version's correct. So let that run. And while that's running, let's take a little look into what RecoilJS is and what we're going to be doing with it. So as I mentioned earlier, RecoilJS is state management for React. So similar to something like Redux or Context, MobX, stuff like that. And it's kind of cool. There's an awesome video you have to check out if you're going to be checking out Recoil. I watched it prior to this, and it kind of explains the concepts and why they actually created Recoil in the first place and what the goal was and what they were trying to accomplish. Basically, the idea was that they wanted something simple where they didn't have to deal with re-rendering and stuff re-rendering out of their control. They wanted control over what re-rendered, but they wanted a nice declarative stateful management system, and it seems like they've done a really good job, but we won't know until we try it out. It's based on a few basic principles. The first thing is this thing called atoms. So if you're familiar with Redux, Redux has the concept of a store and a provider. And what you're doing with that is you're storing everything in the Redux store, and then you have ways to pull it out of the store via the provider. And you do that by connecting your component to the Redux store. And you basically connect any component to the store that you want that allows you to pull down information. The other cool thing about Redux is it really makes a declarative way to manipulate state and change things. So you can do stuff like, when a user clicks a button, you emit an action, it goes to the reducer, and it changes the state. You end up with a lot of boilerplate code to handle that. And while it does save you in large applications, and it's still very useful, we still use it a lot at my current job, and I've used it a lot on side projects. Recoil seems to be a little bit simpler. So I'm excited to kind of check that out and see where that goes. So it has this concept of atoms. And atoms is where you're going to store state that you want to be able to share. And other components can subscribe to these atoms. And the atoms are kind of just the raw state. So if you're thinking about a counter that just has an increase and decrease button, the raw state there is the number. And your increase and decrease buttons would modify that number. Then you have things called selectors. Similar to selectors in Redux, if you're familiar with those, where selectors allow you to select things off the store. For example, if you have first name and last name stored, you could write a selector called getFullName. That would be a function that takes your store and returns you the full name based off the two attributes in your store, the first name and last name. Similar to that, you can write a selector that can pull information from multiple atoms and combine them. So that you're not actually storing that computed property, you're just using the selectors to get that. And selectors are, of course, memoized, so you get the performance of, if you call a selector with the same two arguments, it won't reinvoke the function. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, I'm excited to try it. That's pretty much all I know. I just watched the video, so we'll be kind of going into this together and learning it a little bit together. Okay, let's see where that CLI update's at. Okay, now what I can do is I can do Expo CLI-V and see what version I'm at. Or I can't. Let me try help. Okay. It's a capital V. Interesting choice. 3.22. And let's see what they have here in the docs so we know we're doing the right thing here. All right. And let's search for the Expo CLI. All right, let's see if they have a link to their GitHub. Then we can check what the latest version is. Let's see. Expo CLI. So I'm checking the GitHub because this will tell me what the latest version is. I can look at the tag releases and see where they're at. Whoa, it looks like they have a lot in this. Let's see. Oh, releases. There we go. Tags. Releases. And let's look for CLI. There we go. 3.22. Okay, so we have the latest. That's great. It's just worth doing the diligence because, again, I don't want to run into the scenario where I generate the app, have to run the npm install again. But hey, this is great. This is live. This is what it is. This is seeing what we deal with. Usually, you know, this is what happens. So it's pretty great. All right, so let's do the same thing we did before. And I'm just going to go and pull up that command. I believe it was expo init. There we go. Go ahead and kick that off. And again, we're going to go with the, oh, check this out. This is great. This option wasn't here before. If you remember before, we just had blank with TypeScript, or tabs. Tabs TypeScript was not an option. So, hey, we're going to use it. This is what we want. We wanted tabs. Let's do it. Awesome. See, upgrading has its benefits. Very cool. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see what it basically is going to look like. As I mentioned before, it's going to pull down React Navigation and actually have the tab view. React Navigation is awesome. If you haven't used it, it's a navigation routing system for React Native apps, but it also works for web apps. And that's why it's able to work with Expo for web, which is really awesome. I've used it before in a professional setting. I built my last company's mobile application completely in Expo and React Native, and we used React Navigation. And we updated as it updated, and there were a lot of updates that we benefited from, and it was just really awesome. I've used it more recently in a hackathon app at my current company, and it's really straightforward, and the API's only gotten better and more simple, and it's actually become much more performant. So it's great. All right, so installing JavaScript dependencies, that's cryptic. Let's wait for that to finish up. And hey, let's take a look at some more of the Recoil stuff. So as I mentioned, we have the Recoil Docs here. Basically, this is the installation docs. We're going to run this in a second. Also, it's worth noting we are using TypeScript, and whenever you install a dependency where you're going to be using it with TypeScript, you need to install the types if they're not built into the library by default. And to do that, we can actually use this system called Definitely Typed. It's a community-driven thing where people create types for different libraries. So if the library doesn't have them out of the box, you can check Definitely Typed and see if they have it. There's tons of packages in here. I mean, tons. All the major ones should be here and covered. So you can see in the docs, they probably have, I think it would be in scripts. Let's see. Let's see where they have it. Current status. So yeah, if you want types, you basically do this @types and the name of your package. And if it's there, then you're good. So this is awesome. I've used it for many libraries. And there's so much. And everyone's contributing. And if you don't see types for a library that you use often, pull down the repo and just try making the types yourself. I'm sure the owners of that repository or that library would be super happy that you did that work for them. So let's check it out. Where are we at? Okay, there we go. So it looks like they changed things a little bit. So you can see here to run your project, navigate to the directory and run one of the following commands. So they've moved away from using the Expo start commands, it looks like. So let's check it out. I'm gonna run npm start. Hopefully it'll open up something similar to that screen we saw before with the barcode. I bet it will. Yep. There we go. Awesome. Sweet. Very cool. So Noah asked, why do we want tabs? Basically, we want tabs because my crappy design calls for tabs. At some point, I'm going to want to have a way to view the brews, like individual beers. It'll probably get out of hand eventually, and we'll have to sort and filter it. But for now, I want to be able to show the brews and then the breweries. And you'll go into a brewery and see all the beers that you've picked for that brewery. And we may also want to add some other functionality like viewing it by style. And tabs is just an easy way to do that. Plus, it'll be fun to mess around with React navigation. Yes, sorry, tabs in the app. Yeah, not tabs in the in like the editor or the code or anything like that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So let's go to our terminal here. All right, so here's that barcode. I will show you. I'll download the latest Expo on my phone and we'll load it up on there. But for now, let's check out the web version. So let me pull up this here. We can close this. Thank you, internet lords, for your guidance. This adventure. But hey, that's what the internet's for. It's great. All right, let's run in web browser, and let's also run on simulator. Try it again. Hope this works. So yeah, so let's go. While that's loading up, let's go back here. And let's see what it generated out this time, because you're going to notice it's a little bit different. It's a lot of it different. It gave us a components folder, a constants folder, hooks. Come on. Scheme? Color scheme? Yo, I think it might have given us themability. This is pretty cool. I'm telling you, Expo really nails it. And you know what? A lot of times when you have things generated for you like this, they generate a lot of boilerplate and overkill. But I found with Expo, it doesn't give you more than you need, at least the previous versions, and you can just delete stuff that you don't need. And you have that entry point, you have that app TSX, and you can just get rid of things you don't need. And so you can see already the app TSX is different than the one before because it's giving us tabs and it looks like it's giving us a color scheme, which is pretty cool. We'll actually probably hook into that at some point. The TypeScript language service died 5 times right after it got started. The service will not be started. Okay, relax, we'll figure that out. So let's see what it did. Let's open up our web browser. Oh, so here's what it gave us. It makes more sense if you look at it on a, I mean, it works on web, but it's still very much like designed in terms of mobile. So let's open up iPhone X and see kind of what it looks like. And I'll zoom in for you here. And sorry for the video quality, that will get better in future iterations. All right, so what we have here, let me see if I can make this bigger. You know what I could do? I could do responsive and just kind of drag it however I want it. Okay. So you can see here we have a header. We have our basic content. It gives you a little message. Open up the code for this screen. So it's under Screens, tab 1 screen. Change any of the text, save the file, and your app will automatically update. We will try that in just a second. Tap here if the app doesn't automatically update after making changes. You can also see down here we have the tabs. So tab 2, tab 1, tab 2, tab 1. So let's do that. Let's pop this over here. Let's move this out of the way. First, let's make it smaller. Now let's make this bigger. And let's go ahead and modify tab 2. Tab 1 screen. Okay, ready? We're going to go down to the render here, and you can see we have the tab 1 screen. There it says tab 1. And then edit screen info. It's another component. So let's pop that open. Check it out. There's our, open up the code for the screen text and the other text. And check this out. There's some other stuff, interesting things here. So if you've never messed with React Native, you might say to yourself, what the hell is text? What is view? Where are my divs? Where's my Ps? Where's my H1s? I know some of you out there using divs for everything, tables. Relax. React Native is a little bit different. React Native, if you're not familiar with it, it lets you write React that can render to native views. So it uses this language to basically abstract away the difference between Android and iOS. And in this case, it's also actually working with web. The way this works is it uses something called React Native primitives, or React Native Web. And what it does is you will declare a view in a text. And on web, it might very well render a div and a p. And I'm sure if we click this, let's go ahead and click this open up the code portion here. You can see here it rendered a div. And for this here, where we have this big one, if I click this, you'll see it also rendered a div with some extra classes. So it might not be the most semantic right now, but there might be a way to make that better. But what we're going for here again is native. So here we have our native app. And on this, I'm not gonna be able to use the regular web inspector on it, but you could see that it's working here as well. So with having this up, let's modify this code a bit. Bam. Native screen updated, and this one refreshed, and there it is. Yo, what up? So really cool stuff. And this is where we're going to jump off. So first, let's go ahead and install our RecoilJS dependency. And then we can kind of clean some of this up. We'll go through it a little bit. We'll see what it generated out for us. Get rid of the stuff we don't need, because I'm sure there's a little bit of that stuff. And we'll go from there. So let's do this. Let's open up browser here. Close that up. Leave that there. That's going to be the repo where we put this. Let's go over to Recoil. And let's go ahead and run this. I'm not using Yarn today. I just haven't really used it too much. I know that it's pretty cool. I think I've used it on one project, but we're going to stick with NPM for now because we know it plays well with Expo. So let's go over to our app here. I'm going to clear this out so you can see everything. And I'm going to go ahead and run npm install recoil. And I'm going to, just because I'm used to it, I'm going to save it. It's a dependency. Oh, what do we got here? No such file or directory uvcwd. Not totally sure what that is, so let me just try this again. Interesting. Let's go ahead and search this. I've never seen an error like this. All right, let's see what we get. IO.js issue. No, that's got to be old. Yes, that's very old. It says it's probably because we renamed the folder and it got messed up. Yes, that's probably exactly what it is. Because we deleted that folder, we need to re-go into it. There we go. So now we're on master. Now we can do it. Interesting. Good to know. So again, to clarify what happened there, I had this terminal open when I had the project, original project. I removed that project and created a new one of the same name, but my cursor was still in that old non-existent project. So thankfully it gave me an error and popped me back out. All right, so we just installed RecoilJS, and we'll dive into that in a second. But what I want to make sure is I want to make sure that RecoilJS has types. So I'm going to try to run npm install at types recoil. And if it doesn't have a definitely typed library, it'll just say no. It'll say it can't find it. So there, you couldn't find it. So that's okay. It probably is already included. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at our app.js and see what it's doing. This is usually how I start this kind of thing. I'll take a look, kind of get oriented a little bit, see what's going on with the app itself, and then we'll try to dive in and again implement something that looks kind of like this. The splash screen will actually be able to just import as an image. We'll do that probably later. But what we'll do is we'll get started by just building out maybe a component for one of these little brew cards here. Again, this program is called Figma. If you're familiar with Sketch, this probably looks very similar. This is a web-based design application. I'm just getting familiar with it. We use it now at my current company, and I really like it so far. If you're familiar with Sketch, you'll probably be pretty comfortable. All right, so what do we got? We got the status bar. I'm assuming that's the status bar. We're importing React. Safe area provider. We'll have to look into that. I'm not totally sure what that is. Use cached resource, use color scheme, navigation, that's from React Navigation. Is loading complete? That's calling this hook use cached resources. Color scheme is calling this hook use color scheme. Again, if you see this use in the front, that's going to refer to a hook. And we also know because it's in the hooks folder. If you're not familiar with React hooks, you'll probably gain some familiarity with them here because we'll be using them. So use color scheme. Let's see what this is. The use color scheme value is always either light or dark, but the built-in type suggests that it can be null. This will not happen in practice, so this makes it a bit easier to work with. So they're using some non-nullable React Native TypeScript stuff, sorry. So let's see how this is being used. So in our app, we have, let me see, is there a way, I wonder, in our app to change the color scheme? I don't see a way here. Maybe if we put Chrome in dark mode, which I think it is, maybe it would change. Let's mess around a little bit. Color scheme. So we're passing the color scheme to navigation. We have our status bar and this safe area provider. Let's look at what this is. React Native safe area context. I'm just going to go ahead and search this and see what this is. A flexible way to handle safe area. Also works on Android and web. What is safe area? Let's see. Safe area is the preferred way to consume insets. It's a regular view with insets applied. Interesting. Okay, so it has a little extra padding. Okay, very cool. And then it renders navigation. So that's where our app is really going to kind of kick off. So if you look at navigation, this is where our tabs are going to be defined and things like that. So it says here, if you're not familiar with React Navigation, go through the fundamentals guide. I've used it a bit, so I'll try to kind of walk through it as I go. But where I need to, I'll hop over to the guide. So this is kind of cool. So it's doing a check for the color scheme. If the color scheme is dark, it's going to use the dark scheme. Otherwise, it's going to use the default scheme. And again, this comes from that use color scheme, which we saw here. I'll open it up in another tab so we can see. And so right now, it looks like we're in the light theme. So I wonder if I can try changing this here. So what we'll do is, let's go back to our app, JS. This is where it gets the color scheme. You can see here, this returns a function, use color scheme, that returns this function here, which comes from React Native. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that is in React Native. Cool. Use color scheme. Supports color schemes light and dark, null. Okay, awesome. The use color scheme hook provides and subscribes to color scheme updates from the appearance module. The return value indicates the current user preferred color scheme. So it might be built into the actual device, which would be kind of cool. I don't know how to do that on iOS, but maybe we'll touch upon that at a later time. But let's kind of jump ahead a little bit and get into some of our recoil stuff so we can actually check out this library and see what it's all about. So yeah, Noah, good stuff. Yeah, Figma is the future, next level features. Designers love it. Yeah, for sure. It's super cool. It's just like Sketch. I mean, obviously, Sketch worked, so I see what they did there. Can you change those associations, i.e. text to div, or are they preset by React Native? They're not preset by React Native because React Native is going to render to the native views, but they are likely something that's preset within the primitives that they're using, React Native Web, for instance. There might be a way to change it, and that would be something I would definitely look into doing before using Expo to build a web application. I've only used mostly Expo for, well, not mostly, I've only used Expo for really building mobile applications. So that would be something I would definitely consider before releasing a production app with Expo to the web, would be, is there a way to make this use semantic HTML, which is extremely important for a few reasons. It's extremely important for screen readers, for accessibility, and it just makes the web work better. If you have shortcuts or extensions, it just plays better. So it's always best to use semantic HTML. And I would definitely look into doing that before using this in production for a web app. Again, I've used it in production for native apps many times. Works like a champ. Another thing is you also want to notice that the design is very geared right now towards the mobile version. So you also want to do some work to kind of detect your user agent or screen size and adapt your design accordingly. Again, I'm not a designer, so we're going to stick with the native one for now, but it's something to consider if you do think about using Expo for a web app as well. All right, so let's see what we got here. So we have our navigation, which again, if I open that up, here's our navigation. So we have a navigation function. It takes the color scheme. It will use the dark theme if it's dark, if not. It has this linking configuration. I'm not sure what that is, but we can pull that up as well. Linking configuration. So it's so here we go. It's a configuration. It has your screens defined, your tab 1 and which screen it belongs to. Tab 2, the screens. So that's pretty cool. And then we have our root navigation. And this is the cool part. So we have a stack navigator with some screen options. Header shown false. We can change that to true and see how that updates our view here. There's your header there. If I get rid of it, now you see the header for the stack underneath it. You notice when I put it to true, it said root, meaning it'll use this root header, but we want it to use the one of the tab that we're on. So set that to false. A lot of new APIs here, so this will be fun to kind of figure out. Fun. All right, so we have the root stack, bottom tab navigation. That's this part here. And a not found screen. Not sure what that's going to be used for. But let's go into our bottom tab navigator. So our bottom tab navigator has those two tabs. You have your bottom tab screen 1, which is tab 1. It's using the tab 1 navigator component. Tab 2 is using the tab 2 navigator component. And we can see we have some options. Again, these are all React Native options. We won't need to get too much into this right now, but it will come into play when we start customizing that tabs to look like what we have in our design. But first, we want to get into Recoil. Let's go already. Come on. All right. So what are we going to do? Let's modify our tab 1. Let's jump into this tab 1 navigator a bit. So you can see here, tab 1 navigator is defined down here. And it itself is a stack navigator. It has a screen. Its name is tab 1 screen. Its component is tab 1 screen. And its header is tab 1 title. Not very interesting. We're going to modify this a bit. We're going to change this to become the all brews screen. So this is going to show us all of our beers or bruises. This thing's called brew books, so we're calling them brews. We'll call them beers, whatever. Brewskis. You know what I'm saying? Let's go ahead and change this a bit. Let's just jump right in. We're going to break stuff, whatever. Let's do it. So let's go ahead and change this name from tab 1. Oh, worth noting, this initial route stuff, that maps to, if you look at the web one, see these routes here as I change? So that's important. You can see that's changing there. And that, again, that's going back to our configuration here. Just something worth noting to keep track of. All right, so again, let's go back to our bottom navigation. Let's change this a bit. I'm going to zoom out slightly. Hopefully it won't get too tiny on you. The quality might start to go. So let me just pull that up a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we have our tab 2 navigator, tab 1 navigator. We're going to change this to, we'll leave that tab 1 navigator. We're going to change it from tab 1 screen to all brews screen. And we're going to use the component all brews screen. And that component's up here. Tab 1 screen, we're going to change that to all brews screen. And now we can't just change this, we have to change the file itself. And that's under our, let's see, that's under screens. Tab 1 screen, we're going to change that to all brews screen. And now if we go back here, this should hint at that. So if I hit screen slash, it should give me a little all correct. There we go, all brew screen. So let's save. Let's make sure everything still works. So it's complaining all brew screen is not defined. There we go. Now it's there. So let's take a look at the all brew screen. This is where we're going to start drawing out some of those beers. So here, it's using this edit screen info component. And you can see it has a path screens. It's tab1 screen.tsx. So let's take a look at what this component's doing, which is here. And let's see how it's using that path. So it uses that path as that link. So see, this is the path that it passed. Screens tab 1. That's just the property it's passing. Sorry, not the link. It's that. We don't need that. In fact, we don't really need any of this stuff. This is kind of cool. It's specifying a dark color and a light color. The cool thing about that is I'm sure when you use the theme, it's going to use one or the other of those. So we'll try to keep up with that a bit. I think that might be pretty cool, even though we really only have one design right now. So let's just go ahead and bypass this. We don't need this stuff right now. This is styling. We're just going to toss this for now. And we'll code the stuff inside the tab 1 screen for now, or the all brew screen. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this. Don't need it. Let's go back to our all brew screen. And we'll create a new component. So inside our components, we'll create one called, let's call it brew list. And you'll see that we're using the TSX file extension. That's because that's TypeScript. And any TypeScript that contains JSX, you need to use the TSX extension. And you can see, if I were to open up the tsconfig, and I believe the I guess the Expo kind of hides the bundling system, but basically if you were doing this with web, your webpack config would have the information about how to, that you want to parse TSX files via TypeScript. So, okay, so let's open up our new component called brew list. And basically we're going to do something similar to this. We're just going to import React from React, the classic boilerplate. We'll create a basic component, brew list. We'll use an arrow function for that. And we can add properties via TypeScript, so we can make types. But for now, what we'll do is we'll just have this thing return a view. And so we're going to import from React Native here. We're going to import a view and text. All right. And we'll just to make sure everything's working, we'll just return the view with some text inside it. And the other thing is styling. Styling works a little uniquely in React Native, which we'll see in a second, because I'm going to add a style sheet. Little rhyme for you. All the beer will go here. And so you'll see if I load this up now. Let me just go back here. Okay, so it says unable to resolve module components edit screen info. That's because we tossed it. So if we go back to our screens here, all brew screen, we need to toss this. Not using that anymore. And we're definitely not using this anymore. We're using our new component, so we'll import it. So we have to make sure that we export it here. So we'll use a default export brew list. We can use our prettier to format that. I just used a formatter, so you'll see that. And here we'll get rid of our use of that, and we'll import brew list from, and we'll go up a path, components, brew list. And then here we'll go ahead and, the reason that it collapsed this view is because I used my formatter. In here, we're going to go ahead and render our brew list. It doesn't take any props right now, so that should be good. Let's refresh. All right, now it's saying that tab 2 screen TSX. Oh, edit screen info is being used by tab 2 as well. So we'll just get rid of that there as well. We don't really need it. We don't care about it. All right, now let's reload and see what we get. Got it. Cool. Cool. All right, so there's our screen. We have that tab 1. We can toss that in a minute. And then we have all our beer will go here. So when are we going to get into using Recoil? Well, when we get some state. So let's start with creating that basic beer item component, because that's going to definitely have some component state that we can pop into an atom. So that will be this. For now, let's start simple. Let's make a component that can just show a name, a style, a brewery, and a rating. We'll add the image later. Maybe we'll add a placeholder for it. But let's create this basic component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my components folder. And sometimes what I like to do is just copy a component that already has the boilerplate. So I'm going to copy my brew list. And I'm going to call this thing brew item. You could just call it brew. I'll call it brew item because usually when we have a list of things, we refer to each one as an item. And I'll go ahead and change this accordingly. All right. And so we mentioned we're going to have a few things. We're going to have the name of the beer, the style, the brewery, and the rating. So let's start with basically a hard-coded version of that. So we'll say const brew equals name. Go with one of my favorite beers, Carton Boat, local brewery. Shout out to Carton, always killing it. So the brewery is Carton Brewing. We said we want to give it a style. The style of this is a session IPA. And we want to give it a rating. It'll be out of 5. I'm just going to give it a 5. Of course, it's just delicious. Come on. Come on. So we got brew. All right. And now we want to render this brew. Again, this isn't really a useful application. It's just a static site at this point. But we're going to get there. We're going to start moving stuff up. This is going to help us build out our components. So it should be pretty cool. All right. So let's see where we got. So we're going to have this view. And the other thing we're going to need is a style sheet. That's how we're going to style this React Native component. I think that's spelled correctly. Let me just go ahead and search that really quick. Yep. And then the way we create it is using this create function. And I'm sure if you pulled up one of these, you could see it being used. I think my last component had it. Let's see. Does this have one? Nope. There's one. So you call this style sheet.create function, you pass in an object, and that's how you style it. So it's pretty easy. We're not going to get too much into the theming. We will mess with that because that seems really cool, and I do want to check that out. But for now, let's just jump into creating a style sheet. Some people put them at the top. I'd like to put it at the bottom because I think most of the time when you're going to an application, the primary thing you want to look at in a component is the JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and put the styles down here. So we generally, the pattern is you do styles, then style sheet.create. Again, if we just check that it's capital S, right? Okay. So go up here, style sheet, and it takes an object. And now you basically are dealing with classes. So I usually with every component have a container, and that's the basic container. And React Native uses Flexbox. So if you're familiar with Flexbox, it's going to be very familiar to you. It uses Flex by default, so you don't have to declare display flex. One thing you do have to do is you're going to be using camel case for style properties, which we'll see in a second. And it's pretty straightforward. All right. So let's go ahead and not mess with this too much until we have kind of the information down. So let's put the items grouped in our component. So we know that we want on one side, we want on the top, we want the name, the brewery, and then almost like a second row, you could think of it like a second row, we want and this design's pretty poor. This would probably go like up there a little bit. You want the style and the rating. You could also think of it as in this group, we want 2, and in this group, we want 2. But we'll do it like this because with Flex, we can easily space between to get these spaced like that. And then this overall container here could be its own flex column. So let's try that. So let's group the name with the brewery and the style with the rating. So to do that, we're going to create another view. All right. All right, and let's go ahead and put this here. And we'll do brew.name, brew.style, copy that, paste it below, and do brew.name is brew.brewery. Here we do style, rating, and again, that rating is out of 5. So now what we're going to do is give these names. And we can actually do that by using just the styles. Basically, we can give it a different style for each of the views. So for example, container will be the whole thing. So we could do something like that's how we apply it. And for that, we'll say we want flex direction by default, by the way, since we're in portrait, is column. That's something that is a gotcha for sure when you jump in and start doing React Native. But you'll get over it quickly, and it's pretty straightforward. So we'll leave that there. We'll just say justify content center for now. And then we'll give this one, we'll say style equals styles dot info group. And we can actually give this one the same. Because again, these are both just going to be styled similarly. They're going to use space between. And so we'll make another one here called info group. And we'll say justify content. Actually, in this case, it's align items. Unless we specify that we want a flex direction of row, which I think makes more sense. That's what we kind of want here. So we're going to do flex direction for these info groups. And again, the info group is going to be the grouping of these two things here, this and this. So let's do that. Flex direction, we're going to go with row. And we're going to justify content space between. Sorry, I can't ever type that with that song coming to my head. Space between brittle lines. All right. Anyway, sorry about that. So let's see what this looks like. Let's render out a brew item. Let's go to our brew list. Let's import. Oh, first let's make sure we exported it. Yep. Let's go to our brew list. Let's close these. And what I like to do sometimes is do a little side by side. Got my brew item here and brew list here. And so we will import. I usually do my app specific imports below my library imports. I know a lot of people do that. Just easier to keep it organized. And I believe it's in the same folder. So I'm wondering why it's not giving me the autocomplete. Strange. Maybe it's that TypeScript message we saw earlier. Well, whatever. I think we can reload it and try it out after this. So let's go ahead and just render out one. Just render out that one for now. Let's see if that works. Cool. There it is. You'll notice it's kind of small. On the native, we have an inspector I pulled up by hitting Command D. You can also get it by shaking the device. Obviously, I can't shake the simulator, but actually you can. The way you do that is up here, you would go to Hardware, Shake Gesture. But so what it allows me to do is I can pop open the inspector. And I can click that, and I can see what components make it up. So you can see brew item, brew list. And you can see my brew list is kind of small. It's just taking up the space of the content. But what we can do is we can actually specify that we want our brew list to be bigger, take up more space. And then that'll give more space to our brew item. So let's try that. let's style this a bit. Style equals styles dot container. And again, I haven't imported style sheets, so I'll do that here. Style sheet dot create container, and we'll declare that as flex1. So that it'll take up the whole space given to it. And there you go. It's much bigger. Obviously, it's not very wide. And if we look, it's because the container is wide. The brew list now is much bigger. It's still not wide because it's centering its content, but we can see our screen here is big. It's taller. So let's make some changes to actually have it fit in its space there. So what we'll do there is we'll modify some stuff. So first, let's try this. I'm going to justify that content center. You'll see how that affects it. It moved it to the center. Cool. And then what we want to do is, you'll see that this, if you're familiar with Flexbox, this isn't going to actually do anything because we've already aligned us at center. So we're pretty good there. So what we're going to do is we're going to just declare this as flex1. So here we have our content, brew list, brew item. So what we want to do here is we're going to want to try to get our brew list to take up all of its space. Currently, again, it's a flex column by default. So we have flex column by default with the stuff centered in the column. But what we actually want to do is allow that stuff to expand. So if we look at our tab 1 screen, which we called all brews tab, we'll just want to remove that align items, and that'll get rid of it, putting it in the middle, and allow us to take up that whole width. Boom. So now you can see we have that whole width. Obviously, it looks silly right now, but we're going to fix that when we add some padding and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put an outline around our brew item so that we can see where the brew item itself is. Just will help us kind of give a visual, and it's actually part of our design, which isn't that great again, but let's try that out. So in our brew item, I'm going to go ahead and do a border width. So I don't remember if React Native allows you to do that style. But I do know we can do width. We can do a width of 1. And you'll notice I'm not doing pixels. So React Native doesn't deal in pixels. You're just using integers. And with Flexbox, you're also using integers. So if you can use percentages now, it's used to not be able to. But with using the integers, it's basically taking up a portion of the screen, like a fraction. So if you have a flex box, if you have 4 items in a flex box, and you want to make sure that they only ever take up 1/4 each, you can either put them in a container, and that doesn't wrap, and then we'll take that up, or you can say that they take, flex 25% or flex 0.25. I usually use percentages like that, 0.25, when I want something to be smaller, and it seems to be pretty nice. And you kind of just play with things and see what, as you change the values, how it changes. But yeah, you are not using pixels here, not using rems, things like that. So border width 1, we're going to do border color. Let's just go with the classic. Let's go with something light. FC. And we can go ahead and capitalize that. Let's see what that looks like. And I think we might need to do border style solid. Let's get rid of this inspector for a second. So it looks like we have something going on here. Let's try it. Let me change this really quick so we can make it easier to see what our component actually is. So we can do background color, my favorite color to use, tomato. Can't go wrong. Now we're gonna make this 666, number of the beast, whatever. All right, so we do have the border. It's just very large, and that's because it's the only thing, and we're flexing 1. If we toss that out, there. Now we only take up the amount of space we need. We can get rid of that background color now. And we can go back to our cool. Ah, yes, it is too light. Let's go ahead and do, I don't know, let's try like a CC, CC. Let's do AA, something like that. Yeah, that's probably good. There we go. Okay, so now we have those components there. Obviously they're hard-coded. Let's add that circle for the image. We'll just make it a placeholder. We don't have to do anything crazy with it. And so that's gonna go, it needs to go to the left of both of these. So if I put it above here, it's gonna be on top. That's not gonna cut it. We want it to the left of both of them. So the way we're gonna do that is we're gonna group this in one view, and this is in another view, and the whole view will be flex row. And again, we're gonna lay this stuff out. I know we haven't gotten into Recoil yet, but don't worry, we're gonna get there. We're gonna dig in, we'll get there. So let's just go ahead and just do that really quick. So like I said, we'll need another view to group these. This doesn't need a name right now. It just needs to be a grouping. And then out here, we'll put our image. And so in React Native, you have the image component. We're not gonna have a source for it yet. We'll just do image. We're gonna have a style though. Go basic with that. And for that, we'll say image border radius 50. So again, we can use percents here. And let's see what that renders out. Okay, we might have to put something in there. Okay, border radius. Let's see, unexpected token, border radius. All right, so we can't use that, or I just messed up by not putting a comma. Which one is it? I think it's because I need to do this. No. String supplied. Okay, so it doesn't need to be a string. What if we just use the number? Okay, I still don't see it. So let's take a look at image and make sure I don't need to actually include a default image to get it to show up. You know what it probably is? Probably needs a height and a width. Let me try that first because I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be. So we'll give it a height of 25 and a width of 25 for now. There we go. Oh, I see something. Okay. So now it's because our container, you can see here, let me also give it a background color and then maybe we can see it. Got it. There it is. All right, so we're going to increase that to 50 by 50. That's about right. And we now need to flex direction this row. And we don't want stuff centered anymore, but we do want them aligned. Cool. All right, so we have that basic thing, but again, this view here, info group, is scrunched. So we want to give info group the ability to grow a little bit. So we'll flex that 1, and now it doesn't know how much to take up. So let's do flex 1 on this as well. No, sorry, we don't need that. So let's pull up this here. Let's show the inspector. So we have our brew item. We have the text here. We have the image. We have the other view. This view. So this is the view that we want to make bigger. So we'll call this view info container. So info group container. We'll actually move this above here and move this above here. So it's kind of in the order of how our DOM is. It's just an organization thing. Nothing important. All right, so we have our info container, info group. Info container will do flex 1. All right, let's see what we got now. Info container, flex 1, flex direction, row. All right, let's see what we got. Oh, show element inspector. So we have our brew item, text, touchable text. We have our image here. Our other view is here. So what we can do is we can now do our container is row, aligning item center, which is top to bottom, which is what we want. That's good. We have our image. So we can give our image width. We have our info container with a flex direction of row and a flex 1. And we just need to space it out a bit. So what we'll do here is oh, what did I do there? All right, let's see. What is it saying? Unexpected token info container. Ah, there we go. All right, so we have our info container now. It's a little messed up. It's not stacking, so we just need to make sure, because our info container here has the 2 info items, we need to specify that the info container is actually, we want it to be a column because we want them stacked. And there we go. Spacing is a little weird, but we can fix that later. What we're going to try to do now is we're going to actually try putting this state into an atom. First, we're going to want to add some interaction to the state. So what we'll do is we'll make a basic way to change the rating of just this component, just to give us some kind of interaction with the component and see how it plays with state and how it plays with updating an atom. So let's make a way to just change the rating from 5 to whatever. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and on my brew list, I'm just going to add a button to increase there's only one brew item. This is temporary. I'm going to add a button just to increase the rating of that brew item. And we'll pass that brew rating down to the brew item. What we could also do is we could put it inside the brew item, just have like a plus minus and play around with that and then move it up when we need to. Why don't we start with that? So in the brew item, I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger by just adding to this. Let's make it a little bit, we're going to make the brew item a lot bigger so we can see a little more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say flex 1 on this. Now you can see it's going to be huge. Cool. Let me hide this. So now I have this big thing here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button to modify the rating. And we're going to pop the rating for now in component state and then move it to the atom with recoil and see what it does. So let's have a button. So buttons in React Native are interesting. They're called touchable highlight or touchable opacity. They're not called button. I don't know. Touchable highlight means when you click it, it highlights. Touchable opacity means you click it, it goes opaque, goes transparent for a little bit. We'll use touchable opacity for now. We'll call this increase, plus, minus, easy. And we'll just wrap this in a view. Easy enough. And we will something is wrong with my syntax highlighting. Let's see what's going on here. No, maybe it's good. All right, so let's see if that renders at least. Unexpected token, line 34. Container. I have a feeling it's these and not. Let's see if I get rid of these. Container. Flex 1 container. I don't see my typo here. Style sheet create. It's definitely something up here. Probably this. So there we go. So now we have that all saved up. And oh, Annie's visiting. Hello, buddy. Got my dog here. Hell yeah. So that's all there. All right, so we fixed that. So now let's go ahead and let's import that touchable opacity. So we have that there. Plus. And 1 for minus. Now let's see if those render. These need to be inside text components. That's correct. So the text inside a button has to be inside a text component. All right, so there we go. So there it is. I'm going to just move it outside of this into its own, so it's not just like sitting next to that there. So what we can do there is we can make a separate view for this if we want. So something like then clear this out. It's going to complain because it can only return one item. I'm not sure if fractions work in React Native. We could try it. Looks like they do. And here's my button. I'm just going to go ahead and style that a bit. Move that down here, button, container. And let's do flex direction row, and we'll justify content space evenly. There we go. And let's make them much bigger. So we'll do button text, same thing here. Good. Try that, see what that looks like. Okay, let's go with 34. And we'll click them and see that nothing happens. You can see that they go transparent, but they're obviously not changing the rating because we haven't hooked anything up. So let's hook that up with state. So let's use state for now. We're going to use the useState hook, which gives us our rating and our setter. And we'll start that out with 0. Just basic. Let's add handlers for increase and decrease. Say handle increase. rating. And then we'll just disable the buttons based on whether or not they've reached their max. So if we go to touchable opacity, we can find out if it has the disable ability. We'll just disable it. It doesn't look like, let's see. Inherits touchable with feedback props. Disabled. Yep, perfect. So here we'll do plus will be disabled if greater than or equal to 5. And minus will be disabled if, minus will be disabled if rating is less than or equal to 0. So let's see what that looks like. We have to change the name of this to decrease. Sweet. Invalid hook call. Hook can only be called inside the body of a function. Whoa. What happened there? We're in the body of a component. I called it outside. My fault. That has to be called here. There we go. So this isn't doing anything. It's not hooked up because we didn't add our state here. So what we need to do is show our rating. So instead of brew.rating, we'll just use rating. So there's 0. You see I can't make it decrease, but I can increase it. Oh, that's not doing it. Oh, we had to hook up our handlers, duh. So we had to hook up our handlers so that it actually does the work. So let's do that. So for increase, and we're gonna use onPress. So you're probably used to onClick from web. With this, use onPress. Duh, okay. Sorry about that. All right. Rating is read only. Oh, that's because we can't modify like this. So what we have to do is actually rating plus 1 minus 1. So this isn't treating our thing as disabled. So let's take a look at that. Why is that happening? We disabled the text. That's not going to do anything. We have to disable the button. All right. Close this too so we can see what we're working with here. Don't save. All right. Now let's see. Let's refresh that. So we can use this to reload. We'll reload it, see where we go. All right, awesome. So now we have a rating of 0. If I hit this, it's disabled, so we can't go lower. And if I hit this, it's increasing that rating until it caps out at 5. I can no longer go higher, but I can decrease. So basic state management with useState. Now let's use Recoil and let's move this state up into an atom. And you may say, well, what's the benefit? It's already working fine here. But we know that when we expand the app and we start building on functionality, we're going to be doing more stuff where we're adding things like having multiple brews, having breweries with multiple brews. When we add a brewery, we want to increase the count outside. So we're going to have a lot of shared state, even though we might not just yet. We'll get there. All right, so let's go ahead and check out the Recoil documentation. The moment we'd all been waiting for, yay. All right, so what do we got? So components that use recoil state need recoil root to appear somewhere in their parent tree. A good place to put it is in your root component. Awesome. We can do that. We can put it in our app. So let's go ahead and pull that in. So we know that our root of our component is app. So in here, we'll import. And this is about the point where it would complain if it didn't have TypeScript definitions. So we'll see. And then we'll put that around here. Our safe area provider doesn't need it, so we'll just wrap our navigation in it. All right. So now we have our recoil root. And our app is still rendering. Good. Now what we want to do is, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see this stuff. Now what we're going to want to do is that now that we have our recoil root set up. All right, buddy. Let's start checking out an atom. So here it says an atom represents a piece of state. Atoms can be read from and written to from any component. Components that read the value of an atom are implicitly subscribed to that atom. So atom updates will re-render. Okay, very cool. So let's create an atom. So here's our our example. They have a character count, the text input, some basic stuff set in state here, but they've moved it to something called recoil state, which is what we'll do. So where should we put our atoms? That's my question. I guess we'll find out. Let's go to our basic tutorial and see what the intro is. So it looks like they have their atoms defined, but I wonder where they pull it in. I bet they just define it in another file and pull it in. So let's try doing that. So let's create an atom for our brew. And we're going to have one for every brew at some point. But for now, let's go back here. Core concepts. For now, we'll just create one and put it in a file and just have it have that default state. So let's do that. So we're going to create a new folder. Let's create a new folder for the atoms. Let's close our no models folder because we know how crazy that one can get. And we'll create a new folder, atoms, move that outside, yes, please. And we'll create one called brew item. Let's see, what were they naming it? Font size state. So we'll call it brew item state. All right, and we'll have from here brew item state atom, and I'm sure we'll have to import that from from recoil. And we'll change our brew to use recoil state. So first let's put the state in here. So we have to give it a key. And we'll make our key brew item state. And we'll give it a the rating. We'll start out with 0. That's our initial value. All right, so let's go over to our brew item and import that atom. Actually, let's see if that's actually how we're going to do it here. Atom to-do list state. Atoms contain the truth or to-do list. Okay. We'll call our atom to-do list state and create it using the atom function. We'll give our atom a unique key and set the default value to empty array. To read the contents of this atom, we can use Recoil. Oh, so maybe we don't even need to import it. That'd be interesting. Let's see, the code, comment, components. All right, let's check it out. I don't see a full example of where they actually define the atom. So that's going to be interesting to figure out. Guides. Okay. Let's look here. So we added our recoil root atom. Again, it just jumps in. I don't see anything specific about it. Let's see what happens. Let's create the atom and see what happens. So we have the atom here. Let's see what happens. Doesn't even look like we need to do this. Let's try using it without importing it and see if what happens. Obviously the file needs to be imported for anything to happen. So let's see. Let's Google it. Where to put atoms. Let's see, we got a nice article here. Let's check it out. Credits to whoever made this. Credits to Victoria. Let's see. Is there any way to put atom somewhere? Okay, so they're pulling the atom there and they're creating it there. Okay, so yes, we're pulling in the, got it. Okay, that's what I thought. So let's go ahead and import that. So we'll import brew item state from /atom/. Let's see if this does anything, and then we'll use recoil state from recoil. So for that, we'll do recoil state from recoil. Awesome. Let's see what happens here. So we use recoil state, and we're gonna just change our use state to use recoil state and see what works. And if we look at the docs, it says here with use recoil state, we get a setter and the value. So it should be pretty transparent. We already have the initial value there. So here what we do is we pass the atom. Let's see if it complains. Probably will. All right, let's see. Invalid argument to use recoil state. Expected atom or selector, but got object. So let's check out if we actually made an atom here. We didn't export it. Let's see now. Bam, there we go. I don't see that value of 0 though. So let's see how we actually pull the info out of the atom. So here in their thing, they have a text state, default. And so it looks like default's what they're using there. And if I look at the basic tutorial, atoms, default is what we want. Default. And let's change this to brew item rating state. Be more specific about it. Whoa, misnamed that. All right, let's go back over there. That's my Vim getting the best of me. All right, and then we'll go back to our brew item here and we'll import that. Awesome. Now let's use that here. All right, let's see what we got. Got to make sure we export it. Let's also rename that. All right. Okay, we got 0, 1, 2. Nice. So we're hooked up to Recoil, but we haven't really gotten the benefits of it yet. We've just swapped it out for state. So let's see how we can get the benefits of that. Let's start thinking about how we can add more breweries dynamically and have like a list of them. And then maybe we can do something where we have the ratings or the sum and start getting benefit there. So for now, again, we haven't really touched upon the benefits of Recoil. This can be done in component state. We saw that. It could be done in context if you need to share it, which has some performance impacts as you start to build out apps and gains complication. But again, we haven't gotten that large or that far into the app to actually see this take effect and reap the benefits. So we will get there. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and again look at our design, see where we want to head. So we have this basic brew item. We want to get to the point where we have a list of brews that we can add brews to. So what we can do now is we can create a state of a hard-coded list of brew items, and we can put the names and everything in there. We can just make them up. Let's do that, and we'll create an atom for it with some default ratings for everything, and we'll make it so that we can just increase the rating for each item for now. Sounds straightforward enough. Maybe you'll give us more experience with Recoil. Then once we have a brew list, eventually we'll get to the point where we're adding that form. We may not get to it tonight, but let's just jump in and see where we go. All right, so we have this brew list. So I'm going to create an atom for this. And again, I don't know yet the best practices around where to put your atoms, where to structure these things. I didn't know in the beginning of Redux either. I definitely didn't know in the beginning of context. It's something that grows out of best practices, and I'm sure the team that's behind it will eventually have some style guides or best practices, or the community will create their own that they find useful. I remember in the beginning of Redux, we were putting reducers and action creators in the same folder. Then everyone started splitting them out. Then you had the ducks method where they're all grouped again. So I'm sure the best practices will arrive as we use it more and more. All right. So let's create an atom for a list of brews. And we'll just call it brew state. Brews list. Brew list state. Naming things is always the hardest. Import atom. Whoop. Import that from Recoil. And then we'll say brew list state equals atom key state. And let's put some fake brews. They could be real brews, but for us, for the purpose of this app, we are calling them fake because they're hard-coded. So the default is going to have a few items. And so everyone's going to have a name. They're all going to have a brewery. They're all going to have a rating. They're all going to start with a rating of 0. And a style, right? So let's go ahead and just create a few of these. Okay. All right, so we have that there. I don't know why my prettier is not formatting it, but that's okay for now. We can do it ourselves. Okay, so we'll give them all some names. I'm going to go with what I have before, so we'll do boat. That's from Carton Brewing. I'm going to be picking some local New Jersey ones, so if you haven't checked them out, check them out. Head High. It's from Kane Brewing. This is a session, so we're learning a little bit about beer, you know. Yeah, we're hard-coding beers, but we're learning a little bit. It's good. This is a IPA. Do Eon. Let's do a little good one. We'll go with something from one of my local breweries here, Darth Malt. Style is a black saison. Very good. We'll go with another classic here. Sometimes you just need a classic, you know. Not New Jersey, this one. All right. Let's go ahead and do, what do I got lying around? What do I got lying around? All right. It's an Austin brewery. Awesome Austin brewery. So we're getting some good brews going. Pretty cool. All right, so let's just stick with those for now. Let's not get too, oh, well, we only have one more. That'll be easy. All right, so for this one, we're gonna do, let's go with this town, also food carton. Easy. All right, so we have a few beers here in our brew list state. We're gonna pop this over to our brew list. So let's do that. Let's open up our brew list. And again, the reason that these components can access these atoms is because they have that recoil provider. If it's a winery, it could absolutely be a winery part-time lover. Then just put the name of the winery and the style, whatever you want. Could be anything. Could be a distillery. Whatever alcohol you're into at that given time. Depends on the game you're playing. If you're playing a little Valorant, you probably want beer, right? So you can chill. If you're playing some Mount Your Friends, another big one, then you probably want to go for the harder stuff. All right, let's see. So we got our brew list. We're gonna go ahead and import that atom. First, we want to make sure we export it. I'm just using default exports here. We don't have to. We could easily have an index, and that's probably what I would do. Have an index at the atom level and export them all. Maybe we'll do that after this. But for now, I'll import brew list state from and let's just verify that that's correct. Cool. Atoms, brew list state. All right. And what I'll do is I'll render a brew for each of these items in the list. Easy enough. And we'll modify our brew item to reflect the props that it gets. But first, let's pull this state in here. And so we get these two functions. We're going to pull this out from recoil. We're not even using recoil selectors yet. We may get to that tonight. If not, we'll pick it up after this. So what we're going to do here is use recoil state, and we're going to pass it that brew list state. Now we should have an array of those brews, and we're going to want to loop through them. There's a few ways to render lists in React Native. There's the straight up way to just render them, where you just loop over and render them. We can start with that. There's a flat list, which is a very performant list, which we'll probably want to convert it to. So let me just show that. That's like the type of list where it'll actually throw off items that aren't currently on screen and preload items that you're scrolling to. So it's a very performant list. So maybe we just stick with flat list. So you can see here, renders out those items. And the way it works is you declare flat list, you give it the data, and then you give it a function that will render each item. So it's pretty straightforward. So let's try using that. So we're going to import flat list, and we're going to render that here. And one of the properties is data, and for that our data is just our brews, and then a render item prop, and for that we're just going to give it a function for rendering a brew. We can declare that function right in line, or we can move it outside. All it really is a component function. We'll just declare it in line. So it's going to get an item being one of the items from the data list. So in this case we can say it's going to get a brew, right? So if we look here and we compare to this API, let me zoom in a bit for you. You can see for the data, it's giving data, which is made up of these items. And you can see in the render item, it's going to pass an item. We have to destructure it, and then we can use that. So we have to make sure we destructure the brew here. It's called item in this case. And then we will call, we're going to want to render a brew item. And we'll actually want to pass, now we could just pass the item because it has the properties, but we're going to use Typescript, so we want to specify what kind of props a brew item takes. So let's go over to our brew item and let's specify what types of props. And you can see what types of props, they're the ones that we had hard-coded before. So we're going to create a type for that instead of using prop types, because we're using Typescript. Might as well benefit from it. So we have a name, and that's of type string. We have a brewery, also of type string. Style, for now it's of type string. At some point, we may have a list of possible styles that the user can then add to, and then we can make this a type of style, but I think for the most part it's usually always going to be a string. And then rating, which is a number. And then we just specify that the brew item takes props, brew item props. And then you can pull out each of those items. And now we're going to lose the functionality of modifying the rating here because it's not in local component state. So we think. But since we're using recoil state, we can actually benefit from this. Currently we can't do anything because we're not hooked up to the correct state anymore. We're pulling the rating from here, but we'll be able to actually modify this at some point. We're going to touch on that later. But for now, I'm going to get rid of this stuff. I'll leave the increase and decrease buttons there for now. I'm just going to comment them out since we're not going to be using them right away. I'm just going to comment this out as well. And I'm going to go ahead and put this back to not being gigantic. So if we look at our list now, whoop, that's because I have to finish writing this. So let me just do brew item. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass it those properties. And those properties were name, and that's just item.name, brewery, item.brewery, rating, item.rating, and style. All right. So now we have, something's not working with my formatter. I probably messed something up. Const brews, use recoil state, brew list state, return, view, flat list. I gotta finish up flat list here. There we go. So that's our flat list. And let's see what is happening here. So can't find variable brew in brew list 16. That's here. I think it just needs to be refreshed. No, brew list 16. Let's see what is happening in brew list 16. Brew item, item.name. So it's in scroll view. Let's see, is something happening here? Yes, we're talking about brew here. But we've gotten rid of that because we're now using the properties. So we can just toss that. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and multi-select here. We can do highlight this, get rid of that. And now, there we go. There's our brews rendered out in the list. So pretty cool, basic. See Pikachu in the chats. What up? Very good. Okay, so now we have that information. We have that list there. It's coming from our state there, being rendered here. Now, how do we modify those ratings and do things to actually make changes to the state? This is, you'll see a scrollable list. That's the benefit we get from using flat list. It's super cool. It's super performant. As I mentioned, when you have thousands of items, like I did in the first app that I built, it will handle rendering the items on screen and making sure to not render and keep in memory the items that are off screen until they're ready to be rendered. So really good for big lists. So as this list grows, it's gonna be great. Noah, thanks, man. Appreciate you hanging around. I'll let you know when I do the second one, and I'll put the rest of this on YouTube. We're probably not going to get into the actual meat of the recoil stuff till next video, but thanks for checking it out. I appreciate you. Later, man. All right, so we have our breweries here, and we want to be able to modify those ratings. So let's take a look at recoil and see what they have. And once we get that, maybe we'll call it either some mutation, or we're maybe doing some sort of selecting. Let's see how they do that. So let's see what we got. Atoms, selectors. So we know that they're setters. And actually in the video, if you watch the recoil video, they did something similar where they had a bunch of items that had their own state, and then outside items that were modifying state. So one thing we can do is we can, in this case, we have this to-do list state with default empty items. And then if you look, what they're doing here is they have this add item function. And what the add item function does is it adds a new item to the to-do list. So adding items to the array. So that's how it'll kind of work with adding items to our brews object. But what we want to deal with is dynamic atoms. So having an atom for each of our brews, letting our brew update the atom as its own component state, but then having the brew list kind of like subscribe to those atoms. So let's see how that works. So here they have to-do list component will display the value of the to-do item while allowing you to change its text and delete the item. We use recoil state to read the to-do list state and to get the setter function that we use to update the item text. Mark it as complete and delete it. So if we go back here, they have a default state of empty. They're able to add to the to-do list. There's a text value, a getID function, an isComplete function, and then here they're adding some edit text function. And so what they're doing is they're replacing item at index, and they're replacing the actual internals of that item. So they get the item at that index and they replace the text. So for us, that would be like getting the index for an item. So you can see here, the way they do that is they have their to-do list, find index of list item. This is just a built-in array method. It's the same as array.find, but instead of returning the value, it'll return the index. It'll get them the list item, and then they check for it. Once they have that item, when they edit the item, they'll just replace it. And the replace it index is doing some splicing stuff down here. So then they'll be using, in the next selection, they say they're using selectors. And that's kind of cool because I think that'll reduce some of that boilerplate. So let's start out by kind of copying that first step, because that's what we want to do. We want to follow along. And let's set up something similar where we're just modifying that array and updating those items. So what are we going to do? So what we want to do is, in this case, they have these functions for editing a to-do list item, right? And what they do with these functions is we pass it to, we have our input for each of our items. So here we have a to-do list item, calls use recoil state. It gets itself from the greater list, right? So it has its item, it finds itself in that list, and then it renders the stuff that it needs off of itself. So here you can see we get the index of where this item is. We render the text. We have the edit item text. Item is complete. And then item itself is just declared. Let's see, where is item declared? Item's passed. Perfect. So how will that work for us? So we have our item. It's got a name, a brewery, rating, style, should be style. So what we want to do is we can give each of these items some sort of unique ID, or we can make their name the ID, or their name and their brewery the ID, whatever we want to do. But for now, what we'll do is we'll just compare the item itself, kind of like what they're doing here. So here what they're doing is they're giving the item, they loop through the list, and they find the item. So that's what we're going to do. So within our brew item here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab our brew list. Just like this subscribe, we're going to subscribe. So it may seem a little weird at first because it's a little different than something like Redux where we're just listening, we're calling handlers right to the parent. Like the parent would pass down a handler function. And we might do something like that, but for now, let's just try this and see how it plays out. So we're going to use recoil state, brew list state, and that gives us the brews and the set brew list. And to get the index, we're going to do brews find index, brew, brew equals, let's do brew.name equals item, or we'll just do brew.name equals name. So that's the index of this brew. And now let's write a function for updating this rating. So we'll uncomment this. And so instead of just updating the rating, what we're going to do is we're going to find that item and update that item. So what we're going to do is we're going to say new brew list equals we're going to spread brews. Well, actually, first what we can do is we can find that item. So what we'll do is we have that index. We'll do updated brew equals brews index. That's the brew. That's the brew that we're working with, or this one. And we will spread it. So we'll spread all the properties that exist on it currently, and build off that. So we'll first spread this, and then we'll increase the rating. So the rating equals, copy this one. So now we have that updated brew. And then what we'll do is we'll want to modify that array so that we have the new brew. And now we don't want to modify the array. We want to work with pure functions. So we're going to just clone the array. And the easiest way to do that is to use the spread operator and slice. And you can see that they did that in the example here. They've spread this piece of the array and this piece of the array. So we'll do the same thing. We're going to basically copy this function. Hey, might as well. It's pretty much exactly what we need anyway. And we'll put it up here. And so this takes an array, indexes a new value, and returns the new array. And so what we'll do is we have our updated brew. And we'll call replace item index. We'll pass the array. What array is it? It's brews. What's the index? Well, index. And what's the new value? Updated brew. Cool. So now we have this updated brew. We got this new array, and we want to use this to set the brew list. So first let's store this and say new brew list. Set brew list, new brew list. So that's increase. And decrease is the same, right? The difference with decrease is it's a -1 instead of a +1. So why don't we modify this a bit so that we basically call the same function, so we're not duplicating effort, and just have that one piece of it change. So what we'll do is we'll write this code here. and we'll call it update rating. And here it'll take new rating. And so it'll take the new rating and it will just update it. So we'll say rating equals new rating. Make sense? And so what we'll do is in increase, we'll still have our increase. It'll just call update rating, rating plus 1. This will call update rating, rating minus 1. So now I'm still trying to figure this out as we go. So let's talk through it a bit. We call handle increase, it'll call update rating with the rating that was passed in here. And again, this rating is coming from where? From here, which is coming from the atom, right? So it's coming from that atom. So it's up to date. So by updating it, it'll trickle back through. So we're actually dealing with the correct thing here. And we can see, let's just see if it works. We'll comment this back out. So it's gonna look really funny having those buttons on there, but let's see what it looks like. Okay, now let's play around with it. Minus doesn't work. Plus causes an issue. Cannot bind variable update brew. Oh, let's figure out what that's about. Updated brew. That's why. So we're knowing it is calling the right function. So that's good. Let's see. Good. Okay, so the plus is doing something, but it's not actually updating our list. So let's figure out what that's about. So we have set brew list. We're passing it the new brew list. So it should be doing something, but let's find out why that's not working. So one thing I like to do is just put a debugger, just put a breakpoint. And while it won't work with this React Native, like the iOS version, it will work with the web version. So let's pull that up. And that's because of the routing. All right, so let's see what's going on. So I'm going to open up my debugger tools here. Whoa, too big. And let's hit the plus. All right. So now we have our new brew list. Let's take a look. Which one did I hit plus on? So the item we're dealing with, its name is boat. Okay. Did I hit it on boat? Let's see. Rating 1. That's in the new brew list. So we see that the rating is there. It's 1. And we're calling set brew list with the new brew list. Rating 2. Oh, it did update. Okay. What's going on? Oh, it's updating twice. Interesting. No. There we go. Yeah, it looks like it's working. Okay, so that's working. Let's see what's going on here. Let's try reloading. Weird. Okay, so it is working. So maybe it's just a problem me not reloading. But hey, we got to see what it's like to go and jump in and debug. But now the cool part. Let's look at the render. You're going to notice something interesting. So the way we look at that is I put up our components profiler. And then in here, there's some settings. And I like to put the highlight updates when components re-render. Really cool. It'll show you when components are re-rendering by highlighting them. It's awesome. A must use if you're debugging stuff like that. So you can see everything re-renders when I increase 1. And so that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid everything re-rendering when one thing changes. So in this case, it's our list item is changing, right? Our entire list is changing because it's registered to that atom, which has that single array of brews. And even though we're updating a brew, we're still updating that entire list and thus re-rendering everything. So what we're going to get into in our next video, because we're going to end here in a little bit, is how we can actually optimize these renders. But the cool thing is we have this part working. We're updating this list, and we're using Recoil. So our state is in a single place. So if any other part of that app wants access to those values, it can get it super easily. We could even put a count of like the total rating. I don't know why that would be useful, but basically we could put a count of the number of breweries that have a rating of 5, like world class, right? And so that's something we could easily do by just attaching back to that atom. So yeah, I'm gonna call it here. It's midnight Eastern time. So thanks for everybody who watched along. Again, I'm gonna post this up on YouTube. I'll be posting the code on my GitHub, and in the next session we'll dive in a little further and actually start building out more of this functionality and the ability to add brews with a form, further editing of the brews, and we'll throw on that sweet splash screen and try to get closer to this design that we have here. And so thanks for hanging out. Thanks for checking out Recoil with me, and stay tuned for the next session of this. Oh, nice. We got Marcus saying Recoil is great. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty sweet so far. I haven't even really gotten into it. So I'm super excited to go a little further, see what we can do with it, really make some serious state management changes. And once we actually have the form and we're adding items to the list, modifying items, I think we're going to really see some of the benefits. So yeah, definitely stick around. Follow if you want to keep track of what's going on here. And again, I'm going to be posting it, and I'll push this stuff out to my GitHub. My GitHub account, I'm going to post it in the chat here. This is the link to where it's going to be. I don't know if I can post links in this. I don't think I can. Oh, I can. Perfect. So that's where we're going to have the GitHub repo. So I'll push that up right after this. And yeah, awesome. So thanks everybody for following around, and I'll catch you next time.